Welcome to another episode of the Bear Trap on the Boomer Bust channel. I'm your host Terry, and today we're talking about what if we drafted Quenton Nelson out of Notre Dame. Now I want to give you a disclaimer. This is not my suggestion or thoughts. This is just purely looking at a what if scenario. Some things are going to be facts, some things are going to be opinion, but overall my job is just really to raise some of the questions about picking a person. And my thoughts about the Bears draft needs and some of the guys they might target and potential moves. I'm going to have a separate video for that coming soon, most likely after the combine. And then we can really get into what I think the Bears should do in the draft. But that'll be totally separate. So again, this is just really to start the conversation and bring up the questions. So let's get into it. So I've done my best to do my part of the research. And to the best of my knowledge, I might be wrong. Feel free to correct me. But as far as what we have on the roster right now, we have 7 linemen, 2 tackles, Bobby Massey and Charles Leno, who are the starters. We got Kyle Long, Cody Whitehair, Eric Kush returning from injury. We got Haranis Grasu and Jordan Morgan returning from injury. So out of 7 linemen, we have 2 that are tackles, and those are our starters. And so we got a lot more on the interior, but hopefully guys that are coming back from injury. So what that looks like, when we're talking about picking, Quenton Nelson and what the actual dynamics would be. So what that would do is that gives us another interior person. And I'm not trying to go through the draft, a whole 7 picks. I'm just talking about bringing in Nelson. So now that gives us another interior person, which we do need for depth because we saw what the injuries did to us and helps us with some flexibility. But then we do look at our tackles and see that even though they're starters, they're kind of average starters and we still have no depth. So as far as free agent right now, who we might bring back, we'll see. But right now we're losing Tom Compton and we're losing Bradley Sowell, who both were swing linemen. And some fans like this, some fans don't. Some teams do it, some teams don't. There's pros and cons to both. But we do we have this swing lineman mentality. These guys that can play both tackle positions or play a little guard and tackle. That way we cross train and kind of give yourself depth. And it helps when you look at a guy like Tom Compton, who, if he was on the roster, would be a depth player for not only our tackles, but also our interior. And so the Bears, of course, I think are going to be looking to add some more swing linemen to this mix. I think it might be veteran. I feel like you want a veteran guy who's used to that rather than drafting a rookie, but we'll have to wait and see. So with Nelson, you pretty much ask the question what you want to do with Cody Whitehair, because Cody Whitehair coming out is one of those swing linemen, a 5-position player. And so with Eric Kush being healthy, you could potentially move Cody Whitehair to the open left guard position and have Eric Kush start. It depends on what you want to do. But with Nelson, I think he projects to a right guard. He played left guard, but I think his movement skills and his game are going to fit at the right guard position. So then that really becomes the question. Kyle Long and his shoulder. We know the money we put into him. We know the amount of games he's missed, and we saw how it went when he moved out of position before. I think more so because of injuries, but still we seen him not quite be the same player. So that is the big question. If you bring in Nelson, you insert him on the right side. Well, is it better just to have Cody Whitehair play left guard and Eric Kush play center? Or do you leave Cody Whitehair at center and try to gamble with Kyle Long at left guard? And so that's the question that would have to be answered. I think the key to that is Kyle Long. Bringing in Nelson gives you flexibility, like I said, now that we got Kush and Jordan Morgan back. But as far as a starting piece, Quenton Nelson would 100%, I think, have that starting job as the right guard. And then Haranis Grasu, I don't know if he's going to be around or what they're going to do, but I know the Bears are not looking to keep him or have him on the field for significant minutes. And so really your depth is Eric Kush and Jordan Morgan, and then possibly Kyle Long. Maybe he becomes that insurance policy, which might help him rehab a little bit without having those starting minutes. So that's definitely a question you got to have to answer, but no doubt Nelson improves the front by giving you a solid starter. So those are kind of the logistics. Now let's talk about the arguments for and against. So the number one thing somebody will say for drafting Nelson is we have his college coach. And if you ask me, out of the whole pie, what percentage, does that mean in the draft terms? I would say 10%. It's not everything, but you do get a little more insider information, you get a whole lot more insider information about the person as far as their skill set and, how it fits to what you want to do. That just kind of is what it is. Now, Notre Dame has had kind of a style for the last handful of years, and we don't know how much that matches up with the philosophy of Matt Nagy and whatnot. But nobody's going to be better to tell you than his O-line coach, who you believe has the caliber to coach linemen. That's not in question, but is it a system fit? And if it is a system fit, this coach can get the best out of him. So now you're talking about, out of the whole pie of progression of a player, how big does a position coach play into it? And I would say 20%, double that, double the draft percentage, because those are the ones that are going to teach them their deficiencies. Their athletic skill set and, the skill set they have is what it is. But the ones that's going to help them get to the next level is going to be that position coach. Now, the coordinator and the head coach and the scheme, that's the biggest thing. But you also need a position coach that could get the best out of them. And this coach has already shown that. So yes, that definitely is something that everybody's going to point to. The other argument for Quenton Nelson is that we just lost Josh Sitton. And so with Josh Sitton, there is a starting, there's a hole at the starting left guard right now. And I already kind of talked about the logistics, but a lot of people say, hey, we don't really have someone. And Eric Kush, I think a lot of people forgot about because he was on IR. He is coming back. And Jordan Morgan, who they were high on, he's going to be a guard. He's 6'3". He's not going to be a tackle. I think both of them have a legit chance at competing for it. And again, you could always move Kush to starting center, move Whitehair to left guard. So I think there are options there, but a lot of people kind of want to plug and play. And again, I think Nelson's a right guard, so really we're talking semantics. Either way, people want a starting guard on that line. And of course, you bring in the talk of Trubisky and how important he is and how important it is to surround him with talent. So I think that offensive line and really solidifying it is going to be the number one thing people kind of want to, or one of the things people want to talk about when bringing in Nelson. And then lastly, I think people will talk about how highly rated he is, and that adding blue chip prospects that seem to be can't miss are important for the future of the Bears if we're going to hit, the goals that we have for the future. We got to hit these players in the draft that will be cornerstones, and getting a lineman that's going to be there for 10 plus years is something that really attracts people. So now the first argument I would say against drafting Nelson, and this one is most definitely my opinion, so I understand that, but Nelson is a blue chipper. He's a top prospect, no doubt. But I don't think he's the best guard prospect in this draft. If you watch my video on the guards or an interior lineman, you'll know that I'm a big fan of Will Hernandez. Now, again, because I don't think Nelson is my number one guard, that doesn't mean I don't think he's a top 20 first round pick. He definitely is. He definitely is as advertised. However, I will say that for me, he lacks the mobility that Will Hernandez has. So when you're talking about pulling, getting out in screens, having the range to get to linebackers or to safeties. Nelson is not going to be the best at that, and that will limit some of the stuff you might want to do with him. And then secondly, Nelson is a grabber. And I hear people talk about him, that's fine. They're like, he's tossing people. He probably is tossing them because he hugs and grabs. And it's only about 20% of the time. But the thing is, when you watch linemen that don't know where to put their hands, they just weren't taught, you can tell they just don't know what to do because they aren't coached up well. And so that can be corrected. But the guys that 80% of the time put their hands in the right place, but 20% of the time are just grabbing, those are guys that usually just naturally are grabbers because we got their O-line coach. We know he's been coached well. And so he knows where to put his hands. It's just that he's a grabber. And in my experience, that does not get worked out of a player easily over time. So, he'll dominate, of course, but he might have a chance of being a penalty magnet. And not so, like every play, of course, we know holding depends on the refs, but more so, there's a possibility that, he'll cost you at the wrong times because he's a hugger and a grabber. And so that worries me a little bit. I just think Hernandez has a cleaner overall game. So that's my opinion, definitely. But that would be one of the arguments I would say against it. So now the main argument that you'll hear most people say is he's a guard. He's a low impact player at number 8. That's too high to pick a low impact player. And I'm not talking about trading back and getting a good deal. We can discuss that if it happens. We're talking about at number 8, taking Quenton Nelson. People don't feel the value is there. We need a high impact player at a high impact position at that number 8 spot when you're picking top 10, not a high impact player at a low impact position. And so that debate, of course, can be had between people, but that is a real concern that you want to get the most value you can out of number 8 pick. And so does a linebacker make more sense? Does a corner make more sense? Does a receiver, whatever it is that people are looking at positions that have a more impact. And so if Nelson is a 10-year Pro Bowl guard, how much value does that really give to us, especially in a unit that has 5 people and one person can't make the whole O-line look great? And so that's another question that people will have to ask if you're taking Nelson that high. And I already told you, with me not feeling like he's the number 1 guard, the question would have to be then, is it making sense to take him at that spot? So I think really that's probably the main argument. But then the last thing people will say against picking Nelson is that we got too many needs. I know we talked about Sitton being gone and that being a hole on the O-line, but we know there's a huge hole at receiver. There's a huge hole at corner. And again, this is similar to the last argument, but we got other needs. And it's not so much the impact position, it's that we need talent at other places. And so picking a guard seems more like a luxury pick for some teams that are already 1 or 2 pieces away. And that's not something that the Bears could afford to do. So that's kind of everything, from my point of view, just looking at it anyway. So I would love to hear the conversation, though. Picking Quenton Nelson at number 8, are you for that? Are you against that? Do you see upside to it? Do you see downside to it? Does it make sense at number 8? Not trading back, but at number 8, does it make sense for you? And where do you think he would fit in? Go to the comment section, start letting me know. Share it around, thumbs up, subscribe, and remember, stay up and bear down.